Hello there everybody, we are back for part 4 of 100 Days on Fjordur. So, we're right where we left off, on this plateau, overlooking where the Alpha Rex is. So I'm just going to throw out my Therizinosaurus army and then we can fight it. I think I've only got 6 ones so far, excluding the one that I'm riding. So I think they should still easily be able to kill the Rex though, even though I'm pretty sure it is like a level 100 or something. So I'll just throw all these out and then I'll go and hunt down that Rex. Okay, here's the Alpha Rex. It actually ran off quite a big distance and I thought it had despawned, but no, it had just taken off down this way. So I whistle all the Therizinosaurus onto it. It's attacking this Bronto though, which is annoying because that thing will knock us back. Okay, so we're all just going to surround it and start damaging it. The Theries are doing really good damage now that they've got their mate boosts. And keep in mind that none of these have had damage leveled at all yet. They've all only had points pumped into health. However, the plan is that killing this will give them all a ton of XP, and then I'll be able to level them all up. The Alpha Rex is starting to show blood, which is good, but it does seem to be doing quite a lot of damage to my Theries. However, they all have about 7,000 or even 8,000 health, so I think they should be fine. There we go. Alpha Rex is down. Didn't really get any good loot from that though, which is disappointing, but oh well, I've got a pretty good crossbow already. After this, I decided to go back to farm itsy and bitsy again, as they dropped some pretty good loot. I used all of my Theries and the rest of my Baryonyx, and they were doing amazing damage. Pretty soon, the screen was so clogged with damage numbers that I could barely see anything. Then, a few more Aranios started falling from the ceiling, but it was fine, and I was pretty confident we were going to win this. They both died within only a few seconds, which was amazing, and we did lose one Baryonyx, but I was okay with that. So, I then had to go and cryopod all my creatures and check which one had killed the bosses and had the loot. Okay, I'm just going through all the bags now, collecting the polymer, because I will need some of that in future, and there's the loot, and look at that, an Ascendant crossbow, that's amazing. It's got a good 60% damage on top of my Mastercraft one, which is awesome and should make knocking things out so much easier. There's a bunch of other good stuff in there as well, but nothing particularly useful. I think it'll all just be fodder for the grinder once we get that going. I also went and checked out the green obelisk to see what I would need to summon my first alpha boss. I ended up deciding on the Broodmother, as it was the easiest, but it also had by far the easiest tribute items to get, and I already had some of the artifacts for it. I just needed to get the artifact of the Massive and the artifact of the Hunter, and then we would be good to go. For the rest of the day, I decided that I'd make myself a scuba tank, and then we could go check out those underwater caves that we found in the last episode but weren't able to venture further into. Now that I had a scuba tank, I went back down into the cave with my Baryonyx. This proved to be much easier than with the Thery, as the only dangers in here were fall damage, and Baryonyx are immune to that. Oh, and these piranhas that are in the lake and which begin killing me. And I also got shot by a random Aranio from somewhere, which is weird as I hadn't seen any enemies spawning in this cave previously. At the moment I'm getting attacked by a bunch of piranhas, but I'm just going to try and get onto this little island here, so then I can throw out my Therizinosaurus and use that to swim around instead. Most high-level creatures have a really good oxygen stat anyway, so you actually don't need aquatic dinos to do what is hopefully going to be a small underwater cave like this. There's also a Sarco, so I decide to kill that, but then I get dismounted by it, which is annoying. So, I throw out my Therizinosaurus, but it doesn't fit. I whistle it onto neutral, and try to get them to help me out. Luckily, I've got my Ascendant flak on, so I'm not taking too much damage. However, the piranhas are still being annoying. I try to get to my Thery and eventually manage to mount it, and then after that, it's pretty easy just to kill everything. I also need to kill these Sarcosuchus to get their skin, which is one of the tribute items I need to fight the Broodmother. With everything cleared out, I soon jump back into the water after cryoing up my Baryonyx, and I see if I can find the artifact. Later on, I begin swimming down into the trench, only to find that it's a dead end and there's nothing down here. What? I continue searching the bottom of the water in this cave for a while, but I don't find anything. Just as I'm giving up, I cryo my Thery, and then I see the artifact up on this peninsula. I could have sworn that it was not there the last time I went into the cave, and when I first entered it this time, but it's here now, so I can't complain. I use a grappling hook to pull myself over, and then I claim the artifact of the hunter. This is great, as it's another one of the artifacts I need in order to summon the Broodmother. There's only one more to get, and a few tribute items, and then I can stop worrying about gathering those and just focus on breeding up an army. The next morning, I went back to the volcano cave to see if I could farm some more loot. I'd done this heaps of times off camera already, but some interesting stuff happened in this attempt, so I wanted to include it in the video. As usual, I took off all my armor, got my Deinonychus ready, and then I just did this lava parkour quickly. I did actually end up dying a couple more times to it. I'll show you those deaths quick. Here's death 1. The lava does a lot of damage. And here is death 2. Pretty much died to the same thing, just falling in the lava because I messed up a jump. However, after that, I managed to get into the rest of the cave, where things became a bit easier. I saw this yellow drop up on a ledge, and I'd already killed all the surrounding enemies, so I decided to try and get it. However, in episode 2, this yellow drop had been the death of me, as I'd had to log out of the game to dislodge my grappling hook as it had glitched for some reason, and then when I'd done that, all the creatures had respawned and killed me and my Deinonychus. But in here, I got an Ascendant Longneck rifle with an insane damage stat. This thing was so good, and it actually meant that I might get more value out of using trank darts rather than trank arrows, even though I already had an Ascendant crossbow. It would also be good just for killing things with bullets, but I generally don't like to waste my gunpowder on that, as getting charcoal is really annoying, so yeah. After getting the skin chest, I decided to get rid of my Deinonychus and ride my ferry for the rest of the cave instead. I'd actually decided to keep going after the ledge where the skin chest was, as I'd never been down in this direction before, and I thought there might have been more cave drops or something. The ferry made quick work of all the enemies in here, and did it much more easily than the Deinonychus, which was good, but it couldn't make any jumps, so I did have to swap it back a couple of times. So I just killed everything through here, nothing interesting, and I collected all the Titanoboa venom from all of those, as I still needed to get Titanoboa venom to summon the Broodmother. Somehow, I'd actually managed to contract rabies from one of the bats, so I decided to rush through the cave, and to my great surprise, I found another artifact. Like, this was kind of crazy. I had no idea that there were multiple in this cave. But I certainly wasn't complaining, so I took it out, and then I killed these onyx and went back to the entrance of the cave, with my new Ascendant Longneck rifle and artifact in hand. Oh, and a few runestones that I'd gotten from the chest. I spent the rest of day 32 hatching up some pteranodon eggs, as I had a plan. I'd heard that there were actually fire wyverns on this map, which was awesome, and I wanted to get one of these. I do have a strategy for getting them, but it requires 2 pteranodons, so I bred up my old ones to get another 2. I didn't want to use my main pteranodon for this either, as there was a very good chance that both of them, or at least one of them, would die. So, I got the pteranodons out, raised them up, and then I continued my plan. Next, I set up a small death recovery site on the Wyvern Island using a bed, a thatch foundation, and a gravestone. Then, I flew off on my new pteranodon, which I'd crafted a saddle for, and went to go and see if I could find a wyvern egg. I also put my spyglass back onto my hotbar, as you can generally check the levels of the adult wyverns flying around, and this will give you a good indication of the egg level that you will find of eggs in the trench. Generally, each wyvern has 1 egg, and if that wyvern's a high level, then there's probably a high level egg somewhere. I also got the new pteranodon out in my hotbar, because this one was probably going to be a sacrifice, to draw the wyverns away from the egg so I could go in and steal it with the other one. Down in the trench, I could see a couple of wyverns, so I wanted to get to a safe distance where I could check their levels. Wyverns have a really large aggro radius, and they'll attack you from like halfway out of render distance, so I had to be very careful doing this. Luckily, they did both decide to land, so it was pretty easy to check their levels. Although, The spyglass is a little bit annoying when you have to use it through a pteranodon, but oh well. Then they both landed, so I checked their level with the spyglass successfully this time. And one of them was a 155 and the other was a 160, which was great as those were both high levels. Wyverns can spawn up to 180 on my server settings, which is interesting, as you don't get additional levels on them when you tame them, you just get them at the level where the egg spawned. I went down into the trench to check if there was an egg. I waited for my pteranodon to get its stamina back, and then I took a quick dive down into the trench to see if there was an egg. As soon as I went in there, a massive heat haze effect started happening, and then one of the wyverns aggroed onto me. I could see there was an egg there, so I just flew to the second wyvern to anger it as well, and then I used my pteranodon to draw them both away from the nest. The plan was that I would get them as far away as I could with this pteranodon, and then I'd let them kill me, but they'd be far away from the nest, so then I could just come back on my second pteranodon and steal the egg without any danger. This was going pretty well so far. I went past a few more wyverns, but then I got blasted with fire, and my pteranodon was taking damage pretty quickly. It was gonna run out of stamina soon as well, so it was no surprise when it eventually died. Then I realized that I actually had my armor on still, so I tried to take this off so it wouldn't take massive durability damage, but then I died as well. Didn't take too much durability, so it wasn't that big a deal. Next, I spawned back at the bed that I had made, used the corpse recovery gravestone to get my items back, and then I flew off on the second pteranodon to steal the egg. Back in the trench, I quickly dove down to the nest and stole the egg. Luckily, no more wyverns had spawned in, so I was perfectly safe doing this. I did notice that there was a cave into the side of the trench, but I didn't want to check that out now, as I just wanted to get home with this egg safely. So I picked it up, and it was a 160, which was perfect, as this was the higher of the two wyvern levels. Then I realized that my pteranodon was encumbered and couldn't actually fly away, so I had to clear out my inventory a bit to get going back to bed. Upon arriving back home, I lit my torch circle and threw out my wyvern egg. It was just starting to get dark, and the torches were ridiculously bright on my screen, but there we had it, a 160 wyvern. But that was the end of day 33. I spent the rest of the morning raising and imprinting my wyvern. I managed to do this without wyvern milk because the growth rate on my server is quite high, which means that he became an adult and could eat meat before he starved to death due to lack of milk. Once he became an adult, I took him out for a small test flight, despite the fact that he was still on low health. Wyverns are really fast, much faster than pteranodons, but they have a really wide turning radius, which is kind of annoying sometimes. They also have a cool fire breath attack, which hits multiple times and does decent damage, as well as a basic bite, which also does really good damage. They've also got really good health. This one came out with about 7,000 unleveled, so that's pretty good. I spent the rest of the day out leveling the wyvern by killing Spinosaurus and other such creatures. This was good, as it also gave me some of the tribute items that I would need by day 50 in order to summon the Broodmother. However, I would have to summon all of the other bosses by day 100 as well, so I started collecting their tributes too. Then I noticed that a baryonyx was in the bushes over in the distance, so I had a look at it with my spyglass. Turned out to be a 135, which was really good, as I still wanted to get a baryonyx in order to do caves that had an underwater section, and just to go get deep sea loot crates and similar things, or even if I just want to tame an underwater dinosaur at some point. So, I accidentally tried to use the breath attack, which wasn't what I meant to do. I tried to pick it up instead, but it kept hugging under the legs of this brachiosaurus, and I couldn't pick it up. Wyverns do also have a pickup attack, which allows them to grab smaller creatures and carry them, so I would just do this, grab the baryonyx, and then drop him back at base. After picking up the Barry, I quickly flew back to base and dropped him in the small enclosed section that had walls, so he wouldn't be able to run away. I did kind of mess up the drop, and he ended up on the cliff, but it ended up being alright. Hopefully I wouldn't need to trap him further than this and I could just knock him out within this little pen. With my new Ascendant crossbow, it didn't take many arrows at all to knock him unconscious. It easily would have been less than 20. Baryonyx don't have that high torpor, but he was still a 135, so you would expect a decent amount. Now I just needed to go and collect some fish, as Baryonyx will only eat fish meat. I also continued the expansion of my Therizinosaurus army. While all of this had been going on, they'd been sitting in my base laying eggs, so I hatched all of them and began to raise the babies. I would have to go and get some berries to feed them all, and then they could just sit there while they healed up, as they weren't any use in a boss fight if they were still on low health. To finish off the day, I decided that I'd go and explore Asgard, which was the final realm that I hadn't been to yet. I already had plenty of runestones as I'd been grinding the lava cave for ages, so I stuck them into the terminal and then I teleported over. Once in Asgard, I had a quick look around and then set off on my Wyvern. It was a really cool area, mostly wide open plains with multiple coloured trees. I didn't see many creatures, but that usually happens with me. I'll go to a new area that I haven't been to yet, and it will take some time for the creatures to spawn in, but after that the spawns do behave as normal. I had a quick look around, but I didn't really find much interesting until the next night. As it began getting dark, I rounded the mountain to see this awesome looking glowing blue forest. There wasn't anything here, it just looked cool. The next morning, I continued exploring the map when I ran across a 150 snow owl. I didn't even realize these guys spawned on this map, and it was cool that they did. I considered trying to tame him, despite already having a really good flying creature, but that didn't work out in the end, as they started attacking some mammoths, and then they both died. That was pretty sad, as even if I hadn't tamed them, I would have wanted for them to survive. However, that was that, and they did end up both dying. Later in that day, I found this cool looking altar with what appeared to be a portal. So I took some of the good items out of my Wyvern's inventory, and then I shot him with the soul gun to put him in a ball so I could investigate on the theory. I thought the portal might have led to a cave or something, but it was actually even better, or at least I thought it was at this point. It appeared to be another world boss terminal, which was exciting, as I thought these were all quite easy and I should be able to kill it with my Therizinosaurus army. But oh boy, was I wrong this time. So I threw everyone out and then I started the boss fight. Once I had my creatures out, I hopped off, stuck a runestone into the terminal, and then started the boss fight. I quickly hopped back onto my ferry and began to look at what would appear. Turned out it was a pair of direwolves, one blue and one white. So I whistled my creatures to attack and began the fight. But I quickly noticed that these things were doing ridiculous amounts of damage. Upwards of 400 per hit in the case of this blue one, which was kinda crazy. And some of my Deinonychus were already dying, and some of my Theries were looking really weak already. I decided to keep at it though, which probably wasn't the best idea, as my Therizinosaurus and Deinonychus started dying. We ended up splitting the two wolves up, just by having a massive mob of Therizinosaurus knocking them back, but we were quickly losing dinosaurs. It wasn't too big a deal, as I could replace these Theries pretty easily just by breeding more, but I did not want to lose the one I was riding on, as this was fully imprinted and had heaps of levels on it. I ended up getting caught in my own army and pushed to the back of the pack where I couldn't really help out, but yeah. I leveled up my Theria a few times just to do a bit more damage, which probably wasn't the best idea in the middle of the fight, but it was looking pretty grim by this point, and I thought I was gonna lose. My other Theries took care of the white wolf and moved him elsewhere, and I continued to attack the blue one, as it was looking pretty low on health and starting to show signs of blood. As my other Theries continued to fight the white wolf, I soloed this blue one, slowly walking backwards as I attacked it, but I was quickly taking damage, and my other Therizinosaurus were dying as well. This was not looking good at this point, and I was genuinely concerned that I would lose all of my dinos here. I considered hopping off and shooting my fairy with the soul gun in order to trap it, but that just ran the risk of me dying to the wolf, as that would probably happen in a single hit, and that would defeat the purpose of anything. So I decided to keep fighting the blue one. I was making progress and it was looking more and more bloody, but my Therizinosaurus was getting really close to death as well. I kept at it though, because by this point there was nothing else I could do. I would either kill this wolf or I would die. Luckily, the white wolf didn't come after me after it had finished off all my Theries, so I just continued to solo the blue one, as my Thery got lower and lower on health. Until finally, I killed the blue one. Thery only had about 2,000 health left at this point out of nearly 20,000, which meant it would have died in about 5 hits from the wolf. So, I shot him with the soul ball. I didn't know how much damage the blue wolf was taken, but I'd assume it would definitely not be enough to finish off on the Therizinosaur, so I decided to check it out on the fire wyvern. He had killed all of my dinosaurs and ended up back by the portal, and he'd also eaten their corpses by the looks of it, which had healed him by quite a lot. So I went up to him with the wyvern and resumed fighting him. He actually didn't aggro onto it at first, which was interesting, but yeah, then I started it. Luckily, my wyvern could actually stun lock him just by moving backwards and continuously attacking, which would prove to be a big help, as I could actually win this fight eventually. It just took a really long time, so I'm gonna speed this up. Put the wolf like this for the entire day, flying away periodically to regenerate my stam, and then continuing to attack it, trying to knock it back without taking any damage myself. This works surprisingly well, and for the most of these runs I didn't get hit for a single time. However, at some points the wolf decided to randomly become immune to knockback, and at those times I would often get hit by a string of attacks and lose about 2,000 health on my wyvern. However, he had 10k health and this didn't happen 5 times, so he did manage to survive the battle. I continued this process all day, until eventually I made a massive mistake and let the wolf eat a corpse. This healed it all the way up to full, nearly, and it just made the fight so much more difficult. I flew away from it, but it broke aggro on me and decided to attack these hyenodons instead, which it killed and ate, healing by a lot. By this point I was getting really bored and my wyvern was low, so I decided to use the rest of my Deinonychus. I whistled them to follow and got them to attack the wolf. They all died almost instantly, but they took away a good part of the wolf's health and allowed my wyvern to heal by a bit, so I just continued the process of knocking it back continuously so it couldn't damage me. This whole time I was gaining massive amounts of XP from somewhere, so I pumped all of this into my wyvern's melee damage to speed up the process. I got the wolf stuck on a rock at one point, but sadly I had to fly away again to get stamina back, and this broke the cycle. And just like that, it was night. My wyvern was getting really low by now, but I had to finish this off, otherwise the sacrifice of my army would have been in vain. Until finally, I killed it. On day 36, I went back to base and stuck all the loot we'd gotten from the wolves into my fabricator. There wasn't really anything notable here. The only interesting thing was some Mastercraft fur gauntlets, which would be useful for surviving the freezing cold in Jotunheim later on. I also decided that it was finally time to start crafting up some shotgun ammunition, so I could use the Ascendant shotgun I'd found in a drop on the first episode. These things only use the standard shotgun ammunition, which is quite expensive, but it's still definitely reasonable. However, first I had to craft up some spark powder, and then combine it with all the charcoal I had to make gunpowder. Luckily, I did have quite a bit of charcoal from all the wood I'd burnt to smelt my metal, and the trees on the volcano island also gave it when you cut them down, so that wouldn't be too much of an issue. I also go fight Itsy and Bitsy again as I'm waiting for the gunpowder to craft up, as they aren't too difficult and they drop some really nice loot. I've got quite a few Therizinosaurus now, over 12, because I've been breeding them all day as well as the gunpowder was crafting up. So I whistle them to attack the spiders. They're doing really good damage, and it's over pretty soon. Itsy and Bitsy are nowhere near as strong as the wolves we fought the other day. so it's pretty easy to kill them. After landing the killing blows, I just need to go and search all of the Therizino's bags to find the loot, and then I can go and cryo them all up and take them back to base again. Just like that, the second one falls and that fight is done again. Back at base, I test out the new shotgun on this random Dilophosaurus. 400 damage from a single shot is insane, as keep in mind that this thing could hit multiple times at a shot from point blank range. This means it could easily do upwards of 4,000 damage if you use it properly. So, to test it out better, I decide to go and do the next cave on my list, and it's the final one that I need in order to fight the Broodmother. So, I cryo up my baryonyx as it has an underwater section, and then I head out on my fire wyvern. After flying halfway across the map, I eventually get to the spot where I build a quick revival station with a couple of beds and a gravestone. It's actually quite close to my old base, and it's just over the cliffs and then into the water. So I level up my fire wyvern so he can heal up on the new health while he's in his ball, and then I shoot him with the dino storage gun and put him into a soul pod. I won't be able to use him down here, so I get out my baryonyx and I decide to use this underwater. I've also got my Therizinosaurus with me, but I'm not sure if it'll be able to fit in this cave. So I get out the Barry, hop onto his back, and then I head down. I also just put on my scuba tank, as the underwater section at the start is quite long, and then I jump off the cliff into the ocean below. I'm hoping there aren't any mosasaurus or tusos down here, as I'd be kinda screwed if that happened, but luckily there isn't really much going on. I'm not entirely sure where the entrance to this cave is, I just know that it's underwater somewhere around here. So, I circle my way down, as underwater creatures can only move down by a certain amount, and they have to be moving forwards or in any other direction while doing it, which is quite annoying, but it makes sense given how water works. I can see a trench down there, and that seems to be filled with heaps of creatures, but I can see jellyfish there as well, so I don't want to go down there. Jellyfish, if you didn't know, will stun you, knock you off your mount, and if that happens, you're pretty much just dead. Even if you have Ascendant Flak Armor and a really good creature, they will just stun lock you and there's nothing you can do about it. So yes, please nerf jellyfish, they're stupid and I hate them. But here we are, I think this is the cave, as there was a little bit of lag back there as the walls were loading in. So I'm just going to head through on the baryonyx. There are no creatures yet, which is good. I think it's just the kind of section where you have to have a scuba tank in order to get through. So I circle my way up as I can see the surface here, and this is presumably the start of the cave. Out the other end of this hole, I come out into a small room with some green crystals into the roof. It's extremely dark and I can barely see, but I notice a crack in the ceiling with some light, so I use grappling hooks to get up there. From this point, I'm not entirely sure where to go, but I just keep going up, as it appears that the chasm keeps on going. I grapple between all of these ledges, and I look for somewhere else to go, but of course, the only direction I can go is straight up. So, I grapple onto the next ledge, and then keep going. Luckily, I crafted a bunch of extra grappling hooks back at base, which is good, as I definitely need them for this cave. Up here, I can see some green gems, which are an aberration resource, and I can also hear an onyx, and I can see it as well. There it is. So let's test out the shotgun, hitting for 88 damage multiple times. I'm not too sure why it's doing that after it did 400 to the Dilo, but it's still good as it one-shot the onyx, and that's all you need. So I just grapple myself up and out of this next section, and then I undo it and fall down onto the ground here, only to be quickly assaulted by a bunch of random things. I cannot see what is going on here as it's so dark. I shoot at what I think is creatures, but probably turn out to be rocks. But eventually I do actually manage to get away from everything, get them into my line of sight, and then I can fire and kill them pretty easily. I'm so lucky I decided to craft this shotgun, otherwise I would have been screwed there. Just need to kill a couple of bats as well, and then we're good. I've also got my Ascendant Flak on, or at least my Ascendant Flak boots and gauntlets, so that means I'm a bit more tanky. For the next section, I throw out my Therizinosaurus, as it seems to be a massive open room and there's plenty of creatures here that I might not be able to fight successfully with the baryonyx. As it is not a max level, it's barely been leveled and it isn't imprinted. The Theri makes short work of everything, one-shotting the vast majority of the spiders and enemies that are down here. It's another really cool looking cave though. I've been enjoying the caves on this map so much. They look amazing and they're really well balanced and fun as well. Like, they've been just as difficult as you need, but not impossible. That's great. I also enjoy that you can use creatures in them, as I find that having to go through a cave without any creatures can be kind of annoying, like you do have to do for multiple of the ones on the island. I know it doesn't really work like that anymore, you can just use cryopods to squeeze them in, but still. I think I can hear a drop around here somewhere, so I have a quick search, but it's not down there. I also have a look down in this area, and then I see it. It was just down by those rocks. So I go to have a look. I can also see a Fjordur's skin chest in that little shack over there, but before I get it, I just hop off my Theri and back on quickly to grab the attention of these Onyx so I can pull them over and kill them. With that done, I'm pretty safe to hop off my creature as there isn't anything else around here. So, I get off and then I collect the drop. Sadly, I didn't find anything good in here, just an Anki saddle and a Tropiognathus saddle blueprint, or no, a Carbonemus saddle blueprint. Both of those are pretty useless, even if I do end up taming an Anki at some point, and I check the skin chest. For some reason, this one actually spawned in runestones, which is great. The other ones I've found have not had runestones in them, so I've had to spawn them in instead. But I've only been spawning 5 per chest as well, and this one gave me 9, so that's great. Probably a better spot to farm now that I've discovered it. But the only way I can see to continue the cave is through this gap, and my Theri won't fit. So I hop off his back, shoot him with the cryopod, and keep going. This next section of the cave might have more creatures in it, so I load up my shotgun in preparation and continue going through. It's pretty dark and cramped in here, so I'm not sure if I'll be able to use creatures or not. Although, the baryonyx might fit through here, the Theri definitely won't though. Oh, and just then, I forgot that there were pressure plates on the floor and I stood on them, which did some damage and some torpor to me. I tried hopping past experimentally, but for some reason I still got hit even if I didn't touch the pressure plate. Before I continued, I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to get knocked out from the torpor, as that would be disastrous. I quickly jumped through, and I didn't take any damage that time, so that was good. I checked back in my inventory again just to make sure I was losing torpor. I was, so we were good to go. I continued down through the cave to find myself in this catacombs section. This was another really well done part of the cave, and luckily my baryonyx could fit down here as well, so I continued with him. Around the corner I saw this weird purple glowing thing with a number engraved into the wall beside it. These numbers were important to remember later, but I didn't realize it yet, so I barely even looked at it. I saw this little hole through the wall, so I hopped off my Barry and went through to investigate, only to find another one of the numbers on the other side. Again, I didn't pay much attention to it, as I had no idea how significant they were yet. I could see the 2 down there on the wall, and I could see the thing, but I didn't know what they meant yet. A bit later on, I came across this room with some color-coded buttons. I got stuck in the roof when I dismounted my Barry, so I ran through and had a quick look. I tried pressing one of the buttons, which was a mistake, as you have to do them in a specific order. I just hadn't discovered what this order was yet. That was what the numbers on the walls were for. They would show you what order you should press the buttons in. So, I tried pressing this purple one, which was a mistake as it spawned in a bunch of creatures all around me. I tried to run away, but I was on pretty low health already, so in the end I just took off my armor so it didn't take too much damage and let myself die. My second attempt went much better, as I got back to this room really quickly, and I'd actually paid attention to the colors and the associated numbers on my way here this time. I'd seen that the green one was supposed to be pressed first, then the yellow, then the purple, so I went and hit the buttons in this order. Thankfully, it didn't drop any onyx or aranios from the ceiling onto me this time, so the door opened and we were able to continue through the cave. So I continued through the dungeon to find another catacomb section where I had to associate the correct numbers with the things. There was this random thing following me in the ceiling. I had no idea what it was, but I didn't really care as it couldn't damage me, so I just left it there. I didn't really want to waste a bullet on it. So I continued through the cave to find this yellow statue surrounded by pressure plates. I carefully made my way to it and saw a number in the wall. It was the number 3, which meant I had to press this statue third. After this, I continued on through the cave until I found the next statue. The statue I found was this purple one. However, I couldn't see a number anywhere. Luckily, I decided to jump off my baryonyx and have a look on the lower levels, as I couldn't see it anywhere up at the Barry's head height. However, it wasn't down there either, which was annoying. Then I saw it. It was on the wall across the cave, the number 2, which meant I had to push the purple button second. Soon after that, I made my way to this small parkour section where I had to jump between these platforms across a pit filled with spikes. However, it was really easy parkour, and I could skip half of it with just a few sprint jumps, so I collected this cave drop on the other side to find an ascended slingshot. That was going to be super useful. Just kidding, I was never going to use that. But oh well, I could still grind it up for resources later, although I'm not even sure an ascended slingshot would give you much. After that, I continued on through my Barry. At this point, I kind of got lost in the cave as I didn't really know what way I'd come and what way I had to go, but eventually, through trial and error, I found the next. After I found a hidden passage around a corner that I'd been missing this whole time, I pretty quickly came upon the green statue. Its number was hidden on this bottom shelf and it was the number 1, which meant I had to press the green statue button first. So I still had to find the column where I could press all the buttons though, so I turned around and kept going. It wasn't long after that I came upon the column that had the buttons on it, which I had to press to progress to the next section of the cave. I'd written down the order I had to press the buttons in, so I did this, starting with green, then purple, then yellow, and finally blue. It was actually the same order as the previous section, with the minor exception that blue and purple, yellow and purple, had switched places. So that opened the door, and then I could continue through the cave. I cryoed my Barry and rounded the corner just to find the artifact that I'd been looking for. This was good as it meant we could now summon the Broodmother. We had all the artifacts we needed. However, I did still need to collect a few tribute items. So, I spent the rest of the day doing that, killing Argentavis for their talons, and of course, Sarcosuchus for their skin, and finally, sauropods for their vertebrae. With that, the only item I still needed for my tribute to the Broodmother was the Titanoboa venom, but I had to go back and farm this in a cave as I hadn't seen Titanoboa spawning out on the surface yet. So I went and did that, and then we were ready to fight the Broodmother on day 50. On day 39, I went back to the volcano cave once again to try and farm some of the Titanoboas that were spawning here and get their venom. It was quite annoying to do this though, as it seemed that it wasn't a guaranteed drop, and that was the only snake I killed in here, which actually gave me some. I had to repeat this a few more times to get the 10 venom I needed in order to summon the Broodmother. I also fought Itsy and Bitsy again, in the hope that I'd get a Therizinosaurus saddle blueprint, which would allow me to get all of my Theries in a lot more armor, and this would reduce the damage they take. Getting a good saddle blueprint would be almost essential for the alpha bosses and titans, although I'm not sure I would use the Therizinosaurus on titans, but I definitely wanted one for the alpha bosses. I killed Itsy and Bitsy again, but sadly there was no saddle blueprint, but there was some more fur armor, which again would be useful for going to Jotunheim and surviving the cold. For the rest of day 39, I searched for a Eutyrannus and an Ankylosaurus, as I wanted a Eutyrannus to boost the damage of my army, and I wanted an ankylosaurus so I could start farming up the metal I would definitely need if I ever found a saddle blueprint. This Yeti was only a low level though, but regrettably I ended up losing the footage for day 40. However, all I did on this day was I tamed a level 140 Anki, built up 7 forges and set them all up in a row so I could smelt metal quickly, and then I went out and farmed up about 10,000 metal and stuck it in the forges and started cooking it up. So you didn't miss out on too much, luckily, but yeah. Thank you for watching, and if you want to see the alpha boss fight in episode 50 as well as anything else interesting we get up to, then please subscribe and like, and then we'll see you in the next video. Bye.